And there were so many time periods where, I wouldn't eat a McDonald's hamburger anymore, but I'd go to Subway because it was, quote unquote, eat fresh, right? And then I found out Subway's bread had close to 50 ingredients, an ingredient in there called azodicarbonamide that you find in yoga mats and shoe rubber. And they don't use it in Singapore.
It can be good if you prepare them properly.
They don't use it in Singapore and Europe and Australia and everywhere else, but they use it here in the United States. Like, what is this chemical doing in our bread?
Why do they do that? I mean, look, Europe is very overregulated, right? In many, many ways. And America is less so, and it's much more competitive.
Right.
And so excess regulation can really be a problem. And now I know that has to be differentiated, and I'm not taking issue with the case that you're making, but I'm also curious. It's like, if they're selling these products in Europe and in Canada, and they're free of, what would you say, chemicals that whose utility people have questioned elsewhere, why do they continue to do it in the US? Like, what difference does it make fundamentally?
Fundamentally, for the food companies, it makes them more money because it's cheaper to use a chemical additive made from petroleum or coal tar or some other substance than to eat real food. And the reason why it's cheaper for them to do that is because it doesn't break down over time.
So you think it's just a matter of economics?
Yeah, it's economics because it allows them to keep that bread there longer at every Subway around the block, right? It allows them to have that uniformity of that product as well, which is what fast food tends to do, which is you want that same product every single time, and you want it to taste the same every single time, no matter who's making it. Right?
Yes, well, and there's also utility in producing food that doesn't spoil as long as you don't poison it, because spoiled food is also poisonous. So it's not like this is simple. Like, I've had a lot of mixed feelings about all of this because, as you pointed out too, when your parents immigrated to the US, there was the immense advantage of free and abundant cheap and abundant calories. And that's not nothing. Like, not starving is a very good thing. Now, not starving and becoming obese and diabetic, well, that's not an optimal solution. And that's definitely happened too. I mean, I was shocked 25 years ago when I drove across the US, especially in the northern states, in the more rural areas. God, we'd go into towns and into little shops when we were driving across, where Tammy would be the smallest person by a lot, including the 9-year-olds. It was just unbelievable. And so I could tell at that point that something was off, and it's got much worse since then. But these problems are so complicated because it is necessary for the fast food companies to produce something approximating a uniform product and to work against spoilage. And there is the complex problem of overregulation that plagues the Europeans, that's for sure. But when I look at it, I try to look at the most important data first. So when I look at the climate change problem, for example, I think the planet is 20% greener than it was 20 years ago. That's this data point. All the other data points are this big. You just ignore them. It's like, no, semi-arid areas have got much greener. That's the end of the argument, as far as I'm concerned. And then with the health thing, it's like, well, everybody's fat and diabetic. Everybody, virtually. For example, this is a terrible thing. So, when they measure your blood sugar, they adjust the blood sugar norms by age.
Yeah.
Well, this is a terrible thing because it means that when you're 40 and you get your blood sugar tested, you're normal. But if you were 20, you'd be diabetic. So what does that mean? It means you're diabetic.
Yeah.
Right? Because you shouldn't age norm that particular measurement. And so that's terrible. And you undoubtedly do know, insulin resistance is a disaster, and too much sugar is really hard on people. That's why diabetics lose their limbs. It's really bad. It's really hard on your brain.
Yeah.
And so this is definitely bad. And then, I came to all of this kicking and screaming to some degree because I always thought that people who were concerned about food, over-concerned about it, were neurotic and really needed to find something better to do. But when I saw the rising rates of diabetes and obesity, And then also learned about the food pyramid. It's like, oh, I see. This is a complete bloody catastrophe and a real, like a rat's nest and a Pandora's box. And well, you found that out when you were in your 20s. All right, so what did you conclude? Like what did you just, you changed your diet and then that's a personal thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
then I couldn't shut up about everything that I was learning.
Right.
So my friend...
You're a debater and extroverted, so that's not surprising.
So I started a blog and I wanted to call it eathealthyliveforever.com. And my husband, who's the tech geek in the family, thought that was a terrible name. And so he said he found on auction a few minutes later, Food Babe for $10. And at first I didn't want to call it Food Babe because it felt kind of foreign. Like I didn't feel like a food babe for most of my life. But I said, why don't we teach people to become a food babe? Like how to be a food babe. And so
it's got a catchiness. It's funny with marketing. It's a tricky thing, right? Because Food Babe has what would you say? It isn't a serious name, but
it makes people uncomfortable in some settings, which I find so interesting. And maybe you can comment on that because it's really interesting that it makes people uncomfortable.
Okay.
Like Senator Ron Johnson, for example, like when he announced, that I was about to give my testimony, he's like, I didn't come up with the name Food Babe, right? He didn't want to take responsibility for it.
Are you ready for a fresh start after the holiday indulgence? Make 2025 your healthiest year yet with Balance of Nature. Those Christmas cookies and holiday feasts were great, but now your body's craving something different. That's where Balance of Nature comes in, the perfect way to reset your health this new year. Getting your daily fruits and vegetables has never been easier. Balance of Nature takes fresh produce, freeze dries it to preserve nutrients, and delivers it in a convenient capsule you can take anywhere. No additives, no fillers, no synthetics, or added sugar, just pure fruits and vegetables in every capsule. It's that simple. Are you ready to transform your health in 2025? For a limited time, use promo code Jordan to get 35% off your first order, plus receive a free fiber and spice supplement. Head over to balanceofnature.com and use promo code Jordan for 35% off your first order as a preferred customer, plus get a free bottle of fiber and spice. That's balanceofnature.com, promo code Jordan for 35% off. Balance of Nature, promo code Jordan for 35% off your first preferred order, plus a free bottle of fiber and spice.
Yeah, well, I think it has the advantage of popular appeal and the disadvantage that it isn't a serious name. And so those are competing advantages and disadvantages. And obviously it worked. And there's no sense talking unless people are listening. And of course, that's always the marketing conundrum. So, I don't have anything more to say about it than that. So, so that's what you started and you started blogging.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so...
Where? On what platform?
WordPress.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
On WordPress.
And so when was that?
In 2011.
Okay, so you're an early blogger, relatively early.
And I gave up television to find time to blog outside of work. So
you gave up watching television?
Yeah, I gave up watching television.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting comment.
Yeah.
For everybody watching and listening, if you're looking for time to do something that you want to do, you can always give up something that's not particularly useful that you are doing regularly. And that giving up TV, that was probably good for you too.
Oh, it was great. It was the best thing I ever did. So I found time to research and write, and I started to just have this insatiable curiosity about all the things that I was eating, and then looking at the ingredients and posting the ingredients for people to see what they were eating. And my friends and my family, like my mom and my few friends that wanted to read my blog at the time. But it started to reach a wider community, and I realized there's other people out there looking for this information on what they were eating, and there was a food movement starting. And it was probably when I wrote the article Chemical Filet or Chick-fil-A that went viral, and Chick-fil-A invited me to their headquarters to consult on their menu changes and ingredient changes that I finally made the decision.
Why did they do that?
They were smart. They rolled out the red carpet. They picked me up in a cow-wrapped car. They were really smart to try to make friends with me. More food industry executives should hear that message, because the reason why Kellogg's is suffering so bad right now is because they wouldn't let us in, right? We just recently went to their headquarters with over 400,000 signatures to get artificial food dyes and a preservative called BHT that's linked to cancer out of their cereals. And they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't even sit down with us to take the petitions in person. So what is that going to do to activists? It's going to rile us up. It's going to make us mad. It's going to make us go harder. And we started a national boycott. And now Fruit Loops is down 54% in the last 12 weeks on grocery store shelves, and their stock price is down. And they're going to.
I gotta say,
yes.
Fruit Loops should be down. No, seriously. Like,
well, of course, right?
I knew that was not a good food when I was like 4.
Right, and
I'd like some Fruit Loops were fine, but really.
Yeah. The reason Fruit Loops is such a good example, they already make other cereals without these additives for virtually everywhere else. Canada, Australia, Europe, India, everywhere almost. And this has got to stop across the board. And so Kellogg's is one example of a larger problem.
With Fruit Loops, for example, like, are you concerned about the fact that it's basically sugar?
I mean, it's not.
More about
I'm concerned. Number one, I think the main concern I have with Fruit Loops is I don't want anyone to ever eat it again. Right?
Yeah, okay. Well,
so this is
concern,
right?
But what is it about Fruit Loops particularly that if you have to focus on what you think isn't acceptable, what aspect of it is? You talked about the chemicals, but it's also a highly processed carbohydrate.
That's right.
It's radically sugar loaded
and targeted towards little children, and the biggest profit generator for Fruit Loops is actually in U.S. schools. In schools.
Oh yes.
So it's being sold to schools and served for breakfast to our little children, and then it has chemicals in it that affect their brains. It causes hyperactivity. In Europe, you have a cigarette-type warning label on any product that has artificial food dyes that warns parents, that says may cause adverse effects on activity and attention in children. In Europe, parents get to have full informed consent on a product. Here in the United States, we don't have that, right?